Tal-Hochberg, Group CTO at Teammate, is going to moderate a panel of industry experts as they discuss important considerations for Web3 startups. Everything you ever needed to know when choosing infrastructure, tools, and best practices. Key topics are going to include account abstraction, auditing and security, monitoring, DAOs, on-chain data, oracles, interoperability standards, and of course, user experience. Jam-packed with valuable insights, come hear about the latest trends and practical strategies for optimizing your Web3 startup's infrastructure. Please welcome Anton, who you already know from before, Omer Greisman, Head of Security Services at OpenZeppelin. You guys can clap. Roy Osherove, Founder and CEO at Legato Labs. And Sarah-Diane Eck, Founder at Loom Network and Cosmos Millions. Gal?
I'm here.
Okay.
So wherever you go. All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming. Thank you for the wonderful panelists. We have the enviable pre-lunch spot. So you guys are all hungry and therefore very sharp. That's great. I'll have with me to be a great group of panelists. We'll have maybe everybody do a quick introduction, but I'll tell who I am. I'm Tal-Hochberg. I'm the group CTO of a venture fund and company builder called Teammate. We invest and build in cyber companies, fintech companies, I think in crypto, most famously in Curve, which was a digital asset custodian security company which was sold to PayPal. So I think before we kick it off, we can do just a quick intro. Each person says who they are, where they come from, and then we'll go from there. I think Anton, you can go first. People can know you.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Anton. I'm co-founder of 1inch. It's a distributed network of decentralized protocols.
Hello, I'm Sarah-Diane Eck. I'm the founder of a layer 1 in Cosmos called the Loom Network, and I'm building applications on this blockchain, such as Cosmos Millions.
Hi, I'm Roy Osherove. I'm the CEO and founder of Legato Labs. We're building a decentralized IP licensing protocol, so intellectual property on-chain, licensing and royalties.
Hi everybody, I'm Omer Greisman, Head of Security Services at OpenZeppelin. I guess most builders over here are familiar with OpenZeppelin. It has basically two sides, the side that builds and the side that breaks. On the builder side, we build the OpenZeppelin contracts library that is basically the de facto standard for smart contracts in Solidity mostly, and a couple of other products for operational sides of smart contracts. And on the breaking side, this is our audit services and advisory in general regarding security.
Great. So let's kick off this panel to give insights to everybody about how to build apps. I think we're in a very interesting time with the bear market and the wider crypto and the wider financial environment. It's a great time to be building things. Let's kick it off with Anton. So you have built and been part of building the largest DEX aggregator in the Ethereum ecosystem. In some days, there's billions of dollars moving through the 1inch application. What do you feel was key to achieve that, both in a security perspective and having a good Dapp with a user experience and a user community from your journey?
I think probably one of the most important things were that we came up to the idea that it's possible and it's something what could improve prices for users. Because that's what I did personally, like 4 years ago. For example, to trade even like $100 of some tokens, I was checking price on 3 DEXs because you could get like $5 more on one of them, and it's like a huge difference. It's like 5%. Why to lose it? And that's how we started on Hackathon. We initially, within like first hour, we built application which was able to trade on one of them and show it all the prices. And then we came up that we could even improve it by splitting amount by different DEXs. So probably this was the first key thing that we came up to this idea. And I believe that we gained the significant part of our users from Twitter.
Twitter.
Yeah, we did some kind of meme marketing with memes. It was fun. And we got a lot of traction in Twitter. I believe was like one of the most important things also.
Wow. Yeah, I think it's interesting how in crypto, Twitter is such a useful user acquisition channel. So, talk about marketing, but we can talk a little bit about infrastructure. Sarah, to you, you have actually built a project on Ethereum and then decided to move to Cosmos. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about, why you did that choice of infrastructure, how you see that.
Yeah, sure. So when I started to build on blockchain, it was in 2016, 2018, 17. And this time I was working in a big data company. And I discovered Ethereum actually thanks to an Israeli guy that I worked with like 8 years ago. I had decided to really put engagement, consumer engagement and so on Ethereum. So this is really trendy now, but back at this time it was very new. And the reason why we went from a Dapp on Ethereum to Cosmos, it was because at this time there was no Polygon and it was impossible to have actual use case on Ethereum because of the transaction fees. And then I really enjoyed the fact that launching a blockchain with our own ecosystem of validators and so on, and running product on top of it, and we really differentiate the tokenomics and decentralized application, which are under a Swiss foundation, so it's non-equity based, with some products that are operating on the blockchain that are not tokenized and that are equity based. And the last product we did about consumer engagement and decentralized review system and so on was acquired by one of the top leading company, international company, backed by a private equity fund in the US. So I did an exit in blockchain, which is something a little bit special, and I'm happy that I made a full entrepreneurial circle. So it's possible to do it, and now I'm launching a new project on the same blockchain, Loom Network, but this time I'm doing something just for the crypto community, which is more gambling and DeFi, GameFi system, because I think it's actually hard to build a product of real life into blockchain, and it's a really big challenge to do. So now I'm taking a little bit of not rest, but intellectual rest about that.
Cool. So I have a follow-up question actually. Anton touched on how important the initial idea was, but how important marketing and user acquisition was. Have you felt there's a difference in user acquisition when you do something in like a chain like Ethereum, where many people already have wallets and have assets on top of it, versus something with its own subchain in Cosmos or validators?
Yeah, that's a good question. When we started in Cosmos, there was nothing. We just enjoyed the vision of a multi-chain ecosystem, the scalability and the tech potential of it. And then the community has been developed. It's not a community as big, and the liquidity is not as big as Ethereum, of course. But for example, we have our own set of validators. Everybody is really active. And when you see the metrics in terms of developers and so on in Cosmos right now, it's crazy. It increases every week. Last week, the active developer, daily active developer have increased by 35%, while it's decreasing on Ethereum, Solana, and other ecosystem. So I think having a small but really strong and supportive community, it's good. And sometimes, and even especially during those times of bear market. And Cosmos is an ecosystem that even Vitalik is mentioning Cosmos when he speaks about his vision and philosophy of decentralization. And I will not extend on that, but the ability to have your own governance and not depending on all the functionalities in a virtual machine are extremely interesting. And now I think because it's the mission and the interoperability of Cosmos, the day it will be more interoperable with Bitcoin, Ethereum, and so on, it will be crazy.
Cool. So we spoke about a new building a Dapp, building a chain. Roy, I think something very interesting that you guys are doing is you're working on a new standard, a new EIP. I think many people, not the holy grail, but one of the things as a builder that's like sort of a holy grail is to say, I've built a new standard that people are adopting. Could you tell us a little bit more about why you chose to do that, what the process was, and how that's, what you've learned?
Sure. So for those who don't know, an EIP is a standard that you can run, but there are actually two types or two main categories of EIPs. There are the ones that are getting adopted into the infrastructure of Ethereum itself, and then there are the ones who are standards that people just choose to accept. For example, ERC20, ERC721 for NFTs, etc. So mine is definitely the second one. It's definitely not the first one, and it's EIP 5553. And I developed it because it was missing. And it was missing because what I was missing is a standard for representing intellectual property on chain and its royalty structure. And I did it because, first of all, it was important to create something that people can gather around and say, okay, this is what it looks like, and so we can build something on top of it and have pluggability. But there were a couple of surprising things that happened on trying to create the EIP. First of all, I realized it's actually much simpler than people realize. You can create it even alone if you really wanted to and submit it, and it's just a process where it goes through GitHub. And if you ever wondered how do you get the number of the EIP, it's the pull request number. That's it. You don't get to decide, mostly. So my pull request number was 5553. So it's like getting a car license number. Yeah. You don't usually get to choose unless you're like someone, I don't know, Vitalik, I guess. The second thing that I realized is that it's pretty lonely to create an EIP that is very niche. So there are a few EIPs related to licensing, etc., but they're not very active. And so it's really hard to find the right people to work with you on it. So it took me a few good months to find someone to collaborate with me on the EIP, to give me feedback. For the big ones, there's a lot of feedback from the community. For a niche EIP that you're developing, the people that do come in and want to contribute, they're exactly the right people because they care exactly about that niche and they're trying to solve the exact same problem. So you're actually more likely to get more passionate people to help you with it. And the last thing I realized is that having an EIP and getting it finalized is a very long process because it requires going through a lot of approvals inside the GitHub process. But those approvals are not actually related to the standard itself. They're related to the formatting, they're related to spelling mistakes and a bunch of other stuff. So it's mostly just paperwork and bureaucracy. So technically you can create a terrible EIP if you really wanted to and push it through and no one will care. Because the whole point of these types of EIPs is that they're optional. So you can create an EIP for chair management in a theater and it could pass because it's not really up to a vote. It's not changing the initial infrastructure. But if I come now to investors, for example, if I come to other infrastructure people, developers, and I say, I'm building this based on this EIP, it means that I've given it a lot of thought. I've actually came through and created something that is more than just a fleeting thought in a startup founder's head, but it's more about creating something that might be long-lasting. And it forces you to be very generic, to think about something that people can use for the next 15, 20 years maybe. So it became very generic in the process. It was a great learning experience as a builder to try to think about things in a more generic way and how this affects other types of copyright, not just music, not just video, but maybe trademarks, maybe patents in the future. That's the type of stuff we're talking about. And to me, that's very, very interesting.
That's so cool. Thank you for sharing with everyone, that we can all do it. Something that seems so unachievable and so great that we can do it. And maybe we'll see more EIPs come out of this crowd. I want to shift to something a little bit, not exactly technical, but to you, Omer, sorry. A question that people have when building smart contracts, and it's something that's been on people's minds for a while. When you build a new project, it's a decision you have to make pretty early on, which is do you make your Dapp, your smart contracts, upgradable or not? Right? And it's something that affects your security, it's something that affects user experiences when you have upgrades. And I think we're going to have multiple opinions, and I'll open it to everybody in a second. But as someone who comes from OpenZeppelin, who's seen a lot of projects, what do you think on the subject? To people, what should they do, like when they choose to upgrade, not upgrade?
Yeah, thanks for letting me start on that. I think there's my opinion and the kind of ideology I grew up with in the last 10 years about what blockchain is and everything. We would like everything to be immutable when we talk about code, but then there's real life And we see that on our team every day. Basically, the potential catastrophes that sometimes project develops, and 100% upgradable, okay? We need that capability. That being said, when we talk about upgradability, the main caveat here is to wrap it with some type of a very robust governance mechanism, okay? It's upgradable, but like the community should be fully aware of what type of upgrades are you capable of doing, what type of access level those owners have, then what section of the code can they really upgrade, what are the planned upgrades in the future, and basically making sure there's full visibility from the users and the community about what capabilities do you have in order to change fundamental things in your protocol. And then, basically piling on top of that is some type of a governance process that allows you to do that in some type of a cascading way, or not do anything like immediately. So this would be some type of, I would say, auditing level by the community and by the users for your governance process that wraps the upgradability mechanism.
Doesn't that open you up to attacks though? So that we've seen attacks where people will loan coins, vote in governance with a big chunk that they've loaned, and then upgrade contracts or change treasuries, steal all the money. So. Yeah,
this is basically the classic tension between operational and business needs to security.
Yeah.
I mean, we can discuss it for days about that, but specifically with governance, yes. I mean, we've seen a couple of the recent attacks that were exactly about the governance mechanism. There are folks there that were basically reviewing, like there's auditors, but there are black hats that are reviewing your code, and they'll find the vulnerabilities to attack your code. So the government's basic mechanism should be always audited as well and follow best practices of coding. So don't stop at the code itself, but also the governance mechanism. And we can also talk about like how we handle keys, etc., but that's another discussion.
So, maybe we can do a quick fire round. Like, people on the panel, what do you think? Upgradable contracts or static contracts? What do you think?
Yes, exactly. That's a good question.
Good question.
The way that we designed the protocol for Legato was that we wanted to have autonomy for the creators, and we wanted to be relatively what we'll call a true decentralized protocol. In other words, can you create a permissionless protocol where people can upload or their licensing information, and they do it permissionlessly, and they can trust that you won't do a rug pull on them or anything like that? And I think that, to me, hacking is one example of a risk, but there is, I think, a more, not even nefarious, but a realistic risk that happens in companies that create protocols, and that is that the company, even if the governance is great and the protocol is great, but it's upgradable, the company itself, its IP, that company can be bought and acquired by another company with completely different reasons for acquiring, and that company can completely then lose the trust and actually abuse the system that was created by changing or upgrading to different types of contracts, not by cheating users, but just by changing how the protocol works so it benefits the company more than the users, etc. And so it does reduce the trust of users. So I specifically designed Legato to be more autonomous, but then my problem was what happens if a nefarious user uses and uploads something that's illegal? And so I had to design a mechanism where I can disown someone else's smart contract from my own meta registry. So the way that I specifically talk about it is that, yes, you maybe uploaded a Michael Jackson song, and you happen not to be Michael Jackson, I believe.
I'm not Michael Jackson.
So your contract will actually continue working, but you will not see it on my APIs, and you will have a red flag on my smart contract that says that you got a DMCA or whatever it is, but it will actually continue working. And it's up to other people to choose whether to work with you or not. Kind of like if a torrent exists for something, then I cannot take it down. I'll just make sure that everybody knows that the real stuff exists over here and not over there. So that's kind of how I view it. But I agree that the other risks are, I don't think that I found the perfect formula for it, but it's just the way that I believe that I would like the world to maybe work.
Yeah. Anton, what do you think? We'll do a different order just to make it.
We, in 1inch, we follow the immutable way since the beginning because, I don't know, we believe that immutability is probably one of the greatest achievements of the blockchain. And I would personally prefer to use protocols which are not upgradable by themselves. We never know how they upgrade it. I mean, is it legitimate upgrade or not? Because sometimes it's not. Sometimes keys are stolen and the protocol is upgrading to something called rug pull. Or sometimes some upgrade, maybe they did not had enough audits and they will be hacked. I mean, I would prefer to switch from version to version on my own. If I see they release new version, I expect them to maintain front end for their old version, and I will move my funds or I will make new approves. I mean, it's much, much safer than at any moment you could see that your wallet was drained because some protocol you was trusting, it was upgraded to something which transferred all your assets from your wallet. And so I believe that benefits which upgradability could offer do not worth the risk.
Interesting. Okay, Sarah, do you want to chime
Usually.
in? Then we can do like a quick debate.
Yeah, no, it was just to highlight the differences that exist in Cosmos, because it's really interesting that there are smart contracts in Cosmos, but for example, when we put a new project on a chain, it's a module, it's not a smart contract. So when we have our own governance by our validator to decide if this module will be truly implemented, it's the validator who actually decide of that. So the functionalities are, you have all the power that you want, you can implement anything you want, but then you have also all the responsibility that come within. And when Cosmos Millions, so Cosmos, I didn't introduce that, but it's like pool together on Ethereum for Cosmos. So we create pool of token. People pool their token, then they generate staking rewards in a decentralized way. Yep. And then there are some winners that won all the staking rewards without losing their, it's a no-loss mechanism. But to illustrate that, we updated this, we launched this module a week ago on our chain, and the chain went down. And then the validator, some of the validators DM'd us to fix, to help us to fix the chain. And at the end, the validators vote if they want, it's a governance proposal, so they vote if they want this module to be implemented or not. And what is really interesting is that they are the one that put their stake in the protocol at the beginning. So we recently raised 4 million, mainly with all those validators. So when they want something to happen in your chain, they do it. And the big difference with Ethereum, because we are talking about governance, but my vision is that you have the people that are creating dApps and so on, and before the miners, now the validators, are really also specific people, and then the interests are not maybe that aligned. They are aligned interests, but sometimes you can have interests that are diverging also, and that can create some complex situation in the case you mentioned. So I just wanted to highlight that because the philosophy is totally different, and so I cannot really debate on upgradable or not, but for me to have the ability to have the freedom and be at your home, you are at your home when you have your own blockchain, it's great.
So, I think maybe you want to go ahead?
I just want to add one last thing.
1 to 2 minutes left.
If you choose immutability, then the thing that you can take with you from the traditional software development world is continuous delivery. You're stuck, which means that all of the problems of continuous delivery that is supposed to solve, which is quick feedback and then fixing, you can't do that. If you screwed up, you screwed up. So it actually does lead to a very long, almost a waterfall-like testing process for smart contracts that are immutable. And so smart contracts that are mutable can actually be delivered much faster because you can actually keep changing them. So I would say that also and I'm a big proponent of continuous delivery and test-driven development, but in this world, I had to make a choice whether I want trust or I want quick feedback and quick changes. And as someone who never cared about security before as a developer, now I care about it so much that I actually prefer the trust of the people to know that I will not screw them over. But it really is, I don't think that there is one answer to it.
So Omer, do you want to respond? Like, I think you came with a certain opinion. People have been sort of like, there's other options.
Yeah, we probably want to spice things up. I'm in favor of Anton's opinion here, and I think he's right. And shout out to OneEdge. We have audited a couple of their code bases, and they have solid engineering practices. So I can say that we don't find any catastrophes there usually, but we do find bugs. But these are all pre-deployment, so this is perfectly fine. What I'm saying here that in order to have this solid, immutable set of contracts, you need to have a very strong practices, as Roy mentioned, around testing and security mindset that is from the very early days, and on top of that, to have solid financial models that are well tested. To make sure that when the day comes, you don't need to update that on a regular basis, and then you can just go with a new version. But the new version, that's a major event from a community perspective and a large user base that need to migrate, and this is always that has its own risk. So I guess to summarize this depends on the situation and kind of the maturity of the team that builds the project.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, you're saying if you're a new project, you don't have your governance down yet, you're figuring it out, maybe it's good to be upgradable for a little bit, and then you can realize, am I going to be able to build robust governance like in Cosmos where there's validators and then it's fine, or do I want to go to be more immutable, which means that my engineering needs to be at a different level because the processes are different and I have to be more mature?
That's true, but the only thing that I basically mixed in two things here, and what was mentioned by Sarah, that governance by itself has considerations of centralization and how the governance process works. So that has another major effect on how things will process. So we're mixing two problems that each one of them should be solved. But we can talk about this for days.
Right.
Let's move on.
Right, for sure. Cool. So I think this is a good segue into a topic that Roy and I chatted before the panel, and he said, "Listen, when I was building back, not in Web3, not in crypto world, security was a thing we thought about it, but it was priority number 5. It wasn't the first thing on our minds. In the world of crypto, especially when you're touching actual funds, security is top of mind for everyone. And so, I think this is sort of an open question, then we'll, direct it. But what are you guys doing in your projects, and you recommend people to do to build secure projects that don't get? Nobody wants to be on web3isgoinggreat.com, like the website that says all the hacks. Nobody wants to be showcased there. It's not good for user acquisition. What are you guys doing to make sure that you're building securely, your project from day one? Anton, go ahead.
We order a lot of audits, especially from OpenZeppelin.
Yeah, this panel is not sponsored by OpenZeppelin.
Yeah, it's just true. We believe that writing compact and efficient code and having good coverage with audits is maybe the only way to avoid issues. Yeah. I mean, if you have 5,000 lines of code and 2 audits, it's completely different from having 1,000 lines of codes and 10 audits, because every code have bugs. When I was a young engineer, I was surprised that huge companies, they have standards that they should probably have few bugs per 1,000 lines of code, and that's normal. Every software have a lot of bugs, especially if software have millions of lines of code. And that's what we can't have in smart contracts. For sure, there are some bugs which could prevent some functionality from working properly, but some bugs could lead to losses of values, because smart contracts are usually work with values. And I believe that compact and efficient code, and at the same time good coverage with audits, is probably the most important thing.
I think that's really interesting that you mentioned compact and efficient, in that many people who are engineers want to add features and want to make it complex. There's an element of complexity that is attractive to people, and you're saying the opposite.
Yeah, I mean, there is a trade-off. You could write everything in assembly, you will have a lot of code, but it will be probably very efficient, like a recent version of OpenC. But they were burning a lot of gas in network, so probably it's a trade-off, good trade-off for them, but it's not for every project. So we're trying to keep our code as much as possible small and as much as possible efficient. So it's kind of, usually it's kind of trade-off, but yeah,
Cool.
it depends on developer experience. Like the more experienced you are, the more you can achieve this. Yeah.
Great. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm pro audit as
You're
well.
pro audits as well?
When we and there are two kind of audit companies, and also when you put your code open source. So, for example, Cosmos Millions, because people can deposit funds, and then you have a randomness. For us, it was really important to have a totally open source project. And the community can review the code, make some audit and so on. But we went also and invested because the problem of audit they are expensive. And especially for when you launch a Web2 company without reaching 10 million ARR or things like that, you don't do an audit in blockchain. When you launch a project, we are in favor to do audit. We realized the last one with Oak Security to audit the module, and yes, it's the security of user now. I think it's so important, and especially when you have funds, as you said, involved. So,
Cool. So you have any tips, maybe Anton, Sarah, maybe Roy, if you've done an audit, of course, Omer, about how to do an audit, how to prepare, like the nitty-gritty of how to do it well, from your experiences?
yeah, I agree. We need to have documented compact code, and also select maybe what we did is to reduce the amount of code that be auditing. Select the most critical parts where you could identify a point, specific point that could be hacked or vulnerable, and submit your audit when your code has been reviewed by the community and so on. Like, for example, us, we had no critical issue, so you have a little bit of the impression that you paid for nothing, but then also the amount work that is budgeting by the audit company is lower because they see that it's already well done, so yeah, straight and square.
We are actually going through two audit phases, but also we start with actually test-driven solidity. So we actually start with writing tests. We're using a couple of tools, but we really believe in the value of automated testing, both at the unit level and full integration level, and then at the API level from the front end. So when we feel comfortable, not just the coverage, but we actually reviewed the tests. And the tests themselves have to have a specific convention with a good naming convention, and that review goes well. And then when we feel confident, then we'll take it to audit number 1, and then after that we get the feedback. We add more tests based on that feedback, then we take it to feedback number 2. So for example, we're working with Safer, sorry. But I think that one of the things that I am going to attempt to do is to also go to multiple different audit firms to get a second opinion. It's always good to see multiple doctors, because when you talk about different types of software and risks, this is the equivalent of writing software that will run on a spaceship. It doesn't kill people if it fails, but it does cause a lot of harm from a financial perspective, and you can't change it once you launch it. That's one of the, at least with the mutable stuff. Yeah. And so I think that there is room for a lengthy process that ends up with a lot of confidence, but once it works, then the protocol is just there, and then you start building on top of it a lot of stuff with continuous delivery on the front end, and a lot of usability and a lot of APIs. That stuff still looks traditionally like everything else, but the protocol itself is the core. And I think that's a very different way of looking at it, the fat protocol, the thin application layer. But since we're building a SaaS, we actually have like a fat protocol and also a fat layer on top of it, which brings more value to the customers. So it's kind of a balance for us, but less auditing on the front end and more auditing on the, definitely on the protocol stuff.
Yeah, I think that something that comes out of this very interesting is we're saying, build as little code as possible, make it compact, hire multiple audit firms, have a very robust engineering practice. I think this is somewhat different than people experiences coming from places that aren't Web3. And I think it's interesting to hear everybody saying like the same messages over and over again. Let's go in a different direction. Omer, you have seen a bunch of different projects. Could you tell us about the things not to do? Like, what have people been doing that caused them to lose their customers' money over and over again?
Yeah, I guess thinking about security is a final step. Okay, basically, we as an audit company, we are the final frontier. We expect projects to be as ready as possible and give us that commit, that is the final commit, that potentially will go, that the one that will be deployed on mainnet. So if you find yourself after the audit actually need to fix something on top of the issues that we already found, this is basically too late. So start thinking about security as early as the design stage. If you're a small team, find one of the developers or one person that kind of acts as the red team, and he thinks about all the things that can go wrong, because everything will go wrong. And if you're kind of a more experienced or mature team, bring the in-house person that is in charge of security. I'm a big fan of testing and testing-driven development. And Anton mentioned these are a couple of thousands of lines of code. When you talk about smart contracts, 2,000, 5,000, 10,000 lines of code. It's a huge project. So don't be lazy. Write your test. The developers should write the test. You should invest at least the time you invest in development, write in testing. We see that all the time. We see that in the issues that we find during audits. These are bugs that could be found by simple testing. We actually, I'll give you a quick tip. We spent as audit company, we actually started at least reviewing the testing suite. We're not only testing the code, we actually do a pre-audit kind of check of the tests. And that gives us another observation of how ready is the project is for an audit and then for deployment. Yeah, I guess this is like the testing thing is super important, because if you go to Rec News, you'll see most of the incidents there are just mostly simple bugs that were exploited and could have been basically fixed if the right test have been written by the developers that actually implemented the logic. Okay, so you don't necessarily need a different QA team. The folks, the developers that write the logic should be the ones that write the test for that code.
I think there's an interesting lesson there, not only for the engineers, but also for the managers and entrepreneurs, where you come to an engineer and you say, how long does this take to build? They say a number. It's usually twice that number. You should plan for 4 times that number, because after they spend twice that number building it, they're going to have to spend exactly that amount of time to write the test. And you should think about that ahead of time. And remember that if you push them, you may pay for that later with breaches and things like that. And I think that's something to keep in mind.
Actually, there's a way to solve that. You start with the tests. And then you don't need to spend more time writing them after. It's actually faster to write the code if you write the test first, just so you know. I wrote a book about it. Google it.
All right. I have one more question on security, and then we'll open it for questions from the crowd. We've focused a lot on smart contracts here. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, let me shortly add to Omer's answer. I think we would agree that developers should be lazy in writing smart contracts code and not be lazy in writing tests. When I see like different projects, I sometimes see they re-implement some things which are already implemented in libraries, like OpenZeppelin, Solidity library, or any other library which is like heavily audited, heavily used, and some projects are still rewriting this code on their own, and they're not properly testing it, for sure. Once we saw a project, I believe everyone remember it, but I will not name it directly. They wrote code which had ERC20 implementation, own implementation inside of it, and they did not manage to use tests of OpenZeppelin. By the way, they have great behavior tests which can be imported and used like that. You don't need to even copy them. You can import them and call them to use them. And what they had, people hacked this protocol with their MetaMask. They transferred assets from their wallet to their wallet and doubled the amount. So it was one of the craziest hack in DeFi. People discovered it by just mistakenly transferring assets to own a wallet. Wow. So yeah, the point of my addition answer here is that writing smart contracts should be as lazy as possible, write less code, use libraries which are already audited for sure. And yeah, regarding tests, Omer said everything.
Great. You want some more? Go ahead.
Yeah, just we keep completing each other today,
we'll wrap it
so
up.
we'll meet after that. Just in terms of using well-tested, I would say approved by community libraries, that's super important. Just to make sure that you don't at least make it as little changes to those libraries. Unfortunately, we see too many cases that folks take. Probably the most popular one is the Uniswap V2 router that projects build on top of that, and they change and tweak a couple of small changes there. They change the function, remove a require statement that they think is not needed, etc., and then they create one of those potential catastrophes. So try to use those libraries as they at their original state and wrap that with additional logic to protect the piece that was already well tested and audited and used in the wild.
Great. Cool. So I think this was very, very interesting. Lessons that I have on the top of my head is, have a good idea, market it well to get users. You can write EIPs if you want, it's effective. In Cosmos, you can build things in a different way with validators. Write only a little bit amount of code. Be lazy in writing code. Use OpenZeppelin libraries. Think about test-driven development ahead of time, and hire auditors, especially OpenZeppelin. That's some of the lessons that I took from this. Again, not sponsored by OpenZeppelin. I think before we go to lunch, before you guys eat us, are there any questions from the audience for the panel? Do I see anyone? I have a question. You have a question. All right, go ahead, Ray.
I have a question for the panel. You've heard about the cases where projects got hacked, and then you could see in the audit trail that the auditors found the hack before it would be hackable, and then the founder said, yeah, it's okay, don't worry about it, right? How do you deal with that? Have you come across this? And what do you answer them when they say something like that?
Let me shortly add, is it real situation? Is it real or hypothetical situation?
It's something that actually happened. Not for me.
Not for you, all right.
So as an audit company, we provide an audit report that has our opinion regarding any one of the issues there, and our expectation is to work closely with the team to fix all of those issues. And we have different categories with whether that was fixed or fixed, but not necessarily and usually it's fixed until it's like well tested, and we'll re-audit the fixes. This is like a couple of weeks that we call them fix review. But if something wasn't fixed, we will be very blunt about that in the audit report. And we usually work, we try to see ourselves as the security advisor of the team, and we will be very blunt with the team in terms of this is a risk that you need to make sure you fix, and don't go live without fixing that. And if there's a business need or somebody decides to override this decision, that's on them. But in the 2 years that I've been in OpenZeppelin, we've never been in a situation that there's a business decision to override our recommendation, especially when it comes to critical or high severity issues. So we're good so far.
Cool. Okay, so I'll do one final, fun question. In one sentence, what's a thing that you're very excited about in the space that people are building? Like, as builders, you see a lot of stuff. Like, what are you excited about that you're saying that's really cool? Just 1, 2, words very quickly. If you don't have something, you can go in the other direction. Go ahead, Omer. I think you have one.
Yeah, I'm really excited about the blockchain security space here in Israel. This is something for, just like a quick note by myself, I joined OpenZeppelin 2 years ago, and one of the things that they asked me, I'm the only Israeli at OpenZeppelin, so you are very connected to the cybersecurity gang here in Israel. Please bring researchers and developers. I wasn't really successful in hiring folks from Israel, unfortunately. I hired folks, 20 of the top security researchers around the world. None of them are in Israel, unfortunately. So if you want to work as a security researcher, please reach out. But regardless, I'm super excited about what's going on in last year. There are, to name at least 10 security companies that focus on different levels of on-chain, either on-chain monitoring, threat analysis, etc. There's some change. And lots of folks coming from Web 2 with the right attitude, okay? They are doing this transition, they're excited about Web 3, and they're starting to solve major problems that we have in security, and all of them are coming here from Israel. Super excited about those companies.
Cool, great.
Two categories. One is AI-based contract auditing, or in parallel to standard auditing. I've seen a couple of solutions emerge in that space, and I think there is something there to accompany the humans. And the second one is off-ramp solutions for money, because I think it's still a huge problem. If I'm building a SaaS that's built on blockchain, but it's meant for the Web 2 crowd, then the on-ramp, off-ramp of money is still, well, I guess the on-ramp is kind of a solved problem, but it's still not as usable. The off-ramp is a terrible problem, and I know a couple of companies are still working on it, and I can't wait for that to actually materialize. It's to do with regulation. It's not a technical problem, but I think that would help solve a lot of the onboarding issues that we have today.
Sarah.
Yeah, I think right now I'm very excited about this period of because the true builders are still there, and I think there will be a lot of great opportunities. And I've seen already a lot of different ways. I like this quote of Biltai, which says that all entrepreneurs are, in a way, like surfers, and they need to catch the wave at the good time. But when the wave comes, it's really crowded and so on. And now I think it's a good time to do kite surfing as well. So I like the wind that we get now.
As someone said, a bearish market, bullish development. I would agree with that. Not that many news are coming from crypto Twitter, and we can focus on development more. And I believe this bear market is a great opportunity for projects to build some things in Web3, which is really hard to achieve with Web2 technologies. And I expect that some of the companies which would build really cool solutions, which is easy to achieve with Web3 and is very hard to replicate with Web2, they will start working with top tier Web2 companies. All we know, top tech companies, they will start working with Web3 companies because their technologies allow to achieve some things which is almost impossible to reproduce with Web 2. I mean, it's much different scale of work.
Awesome. I'm excited for that too. All right. Thank you very much, everyone. It was a great panel. Thank you, amazing crowd. And I think we're off to lunch.